How does a universe of motion deal with charges? How's everyone doing out there today? Welcome to my channel. I'm Thomas, and I do videos on educational matters, a lot of different subjects, but I kind of base all those subjects in studies on the tree of life. And so this is the diagram of the tree of life. It is an ancient diagram. It goes back to at least ancient Egypt, and it purports to kind of break everything down into these 12 different categories. You see there's 10 different circles or spheres here, number 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then there is also an abyss here. It's called the abyss. And then there is a 0 above the tree. So that is a total of 12 different categories. And those categories reflect our faculties of consciousness. So the tree of life is more or less a map of our consciousness. And we can understand it by kind of just going through it introductory as an introduction. The 10th sphere is about our survival, our instinct, and this is like our animal consciousness. It's kind of interesting because animals have this kind of full-blown way earlier than humans do. Okay, humans are pretty much helpless as infants. They don't really have this sense of survival the way that an animal does early in their life. But so this is kind of even though this is really the first thing that's opened up as we grow up, it's somewhat latent, and it has to be. It doesn't have to be accessed more or less, but our body has to be able to catch up with our sense of instinct, because we don't have really control of our body to the extent that we would need to be able to defend ourselves, to keep our survival. So the survival instinct, law of the jungle, kill or be killed, the state of nature, fight or flight response, all these things are open as we're born, but our body isn't up to the task at the point that we're born as infants. And so we're more or less helpless for the first several years of our life, whereas an animal is only helpless for a much shorter percentage of its life. I could be wrong about that. There could be some animals that have much longer periods, but as far as I know, that's kind of how it works. Let me know in the comments if you have any, anything constructive to add on that. So the ninth sphere is really represents the first few years of our lives as we're growing up. It's really the domestic consciousness, and it is our heightened receptivity. We're wide open to everything, all the influences coming in. We're soaking everything up like a sponge, especially influences from our parents and our caregivers, people around us in the home. We're watching them and we're imitating them, and then we're memorizing the movements. So we're basically learning everything that they know how to do, kind of one thing at a time, and it's painful. It would be painful if we were adults, but as children in this type of mediumistic trance, we just keep trying until we get it right. You walk and you keep falling down, and you keep falling down, and you keep falling down, but you're undaunted, and you keep trying until you get it. Okay, then the eighth sphere is kind of similar, but it is the public sphere instead of the domestic sphere. So out in the public, we go to church, we go to school, and we get influenced by the experts, the establishment, and the institutions, and they tell us, what's right. They tell us what to believe. They tell us how to behave, and if we can conform to what they tell us, then we eventually can get access into the A sphere. If we follow the directions and do what they tell us, we'll get the best grades, we'll get into the best schools, and we'll get the best jobs. And if we don't do that, we won't get those things. And so even though the A sphere tells us what we're supposed to believe and how we're supposed to behave, it isn't necessarily true. And so a lot of half-truths, a lot of untruths, and flat-out lies, illusions, and deceptions abound here at the A sphere. And it creates a tension in us because we have a certain amount of experience. We're gaining experience, and when our experience actually clashes with what they tell us to do, that creates a problem, and it's usually solved through rationalization. We rationalize the position. So if we have an experience that goes against what the A sphere says, we tend to privilege the A sphere and say, oh, well, they must know what they're talking about. They're wearing a white lab coat, or they have a certain amount of initials behind their name, and so they must know what they're talking about, and my own experience needs to be discounted. And so I need to figure out a way to rationalize that, to come up with an excuse in my head of why it is that I'm believing this thing and not believing my own experience. And again, as I've been saying, this is kind of like an emperor wears no clothes type of situation, where, the consensus, the fact that you think that everybody else believes this thing is somehow swaying you to believe it yourself, in spite of the fact that you can see right in front of your face that the emperor is not wearing any clothes. But you rationalize it and you say, look, I'm gonna be cast out like an idiot here if I don't say that I love the emperor's clothes. And so, at the A sphere, that's what you're saying. Now, the seventh sphere is for people who, the A sphere is about the real world, then the seventh sphere is about the imaginary world. So the seventh sphere maybe is about the world where they imagine that they would have the freedom to actually say that this guy's not wearing any clothes, and then they use other faculties at their disposal here at the seventh sphere, such as intuition and inspiration and creativity and pleasure principle, and maybe they write a song that explains about this great world that they imagine, that where I have the freedom to actually say that this guy's not wearing any clothes, or something like that. It doesn't have to be a song. It can be any type of creative product, or it could be intellectual property, an invention, anything that provides an alternative to this eighth sphere. But eventually we kind of learn that the A sphere is not interested in what we have to say over here unless they can gain complete control of it. They'll take your song and they'll turn it into an advertising jingle for their purposes, but otherwise they're going to shun you and ignore what you have to say and put you in a position where you pretty much have to climb up here to the fifth sphere, which is directly above the A sphere. So, when you're coming from the fifth sphere, you're pretty much trumping the A sphere. The A sphere really can't have anything to say about you because, you've got them trumped. So now, but that path getting from the seventh to the sixth to the fifth sphere, this is really like, your path of initiation, and this is a bumpy uphill grind. It's a very difficult path that takes many years to do in its entirety. And so you go starting at 7, and at 6, you come in contact with where we really are located. And this is our free will faculty. This is the center of the tree. And if there was a map, it would say you are here. But it's a little bit misleading because we are here, but the free will faculty is our ability to pay attention and our ability to make decisions. And we are here, but our attention is always focused here on 8, 9, and 10. This is our comfort zone. This is the way we grew up. This is what we're used to. And so it's very comfortable for us to pay attention to this matrix here, 8, 9, and 10. In order to kind of change that, we need to exercise the other aspect of the sixth sphere of our free will faculty, which is our ability to make decisions. So here we make the important decision to begin to avert our attention from this area here and turn our attention onto the higher aspects of the tree. So that's our decision. We decide to turn our back on the 8, 9, and 10, to ignore all the input we're getting from 8, 9, and 10, and instead turn our attention around and face up at the higher aspects of the tree. This is a difficult thing because it requires a lot of courage. It's very scary to kind of stare into the unknown, which all these are somewhat unknown because they're not, common experience that we grew up with. We might have glimpses or shades of this, or maybe nothing at all. So we might be looking right into the unknown. But the known can become the unknown by applying our attention to it. So the first thing we apply our attention to is the fifth sphere. And the fifth sphere is our sense of justice. And this is also known as karma. Karma is our, as you sow, so shall you reap. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. What comes around goes around. And so this is our feedback that we're getting from the actions that we commit. We commit an action and we get the equivalent of that in return. And karma, it bases its equivalencies on violence, waste, and violation. And so when we act with violence, we get return with violence. When we act in a wasteful manner, we get return in a wasteful manner. If we're paying attention, we notice these things, and we notice that the responses that we get are not optimal, and we can change our behavior. We can attempt to make our actions less violent, and then we get less violent behavior in return, or less violent return. So over time, we can shape our behavior to minimize our karma. And that is, really like the first step toward beginning to understand the higher principles and the higher self. So the fifth sphere is karma is not our enemy. It can be our friend and our teacher. If we are able to, take the feedback, even though it might be some negative feedback, to take the feedback and to take it to heart. Okay, then the fourth sphere is very similar to the fifth sphere in that they're both are about the law. This is the articulation of the natural law, and this is the articulation of the natural law. This is the enforcement of the natural law. So the fifth sphere, karma, is the enforcement of the natural law. The fourth sphere is where it's articulated in things like holy books and cosmologies and theories of everything that attempt to describe, who is God, where do we come from, what are we doing here, what is the purpose of all of it, how do we fit in, how does everything all fit together, all of these things, what the Chinese call the Tao, these are all, in a cosmology. And like for the Chinese, the I Ching, is like one of the cosmologies. You could say the Bible, many other things. And probably your best bet is to study as many of those as you can and compare and contrast them, and then come up with, a form in your head that you can agree with, that resonates with with your own experiences. And so here at the fourth sphere, you're attempting to kind of like harmonize your own experiences with what you've read from all these different cosmologies. And the cosmologies have taken decades, centuries, civilizations to come up with, and they're always, in need of revision because they're not perfect. But the law itself is perfect. But our interpretation of it is constantly changing, and it needs to be tweaked every once in a while. Rather than at the eighth sphere, where the law is just made by decree and by convenience from the establishment and the institutions. They just tell you what the law is. They don't give you a reason for it, and they don't provide any evidence for it. Here, the evidence is provided through the observation, investigation, experiment, experience, and all of these things are all put together. So this is a much more complete, form of the law. Also here we have the universal love and universal language. So this is really our universal category, and it's represented by Jupiter in the solar system. Okay, then the abyss here is our psychic powers. So our ability to tune into and recognize omens, and then also to be able to act upon those omens. And those omens are, synchronicities or coincidences, uncanninesses, deja vus, things, recurring numbers and recurring themes that stick out in our head that we have to say, hey, that is something that's important. Don't just ignore that. Don't just ignore that. Instead, let it click in your head, and it should also give you a path of action. And then if you take that path of action, that is the second part of psychic heat, of being able to take that path. And that is also, causes fear, and it requires courage to be able to act on it. That's why they call it psychic heat. Heat is required to overcome fear. Okay, then 3, 2, and 1 are our divine faculties within. Omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence. All powerful, all knowing, all present, all everywhere, all at once, eternally. We tap into this through sound synchronization, such as mantra, but also sacred music and, trance, drumming and, shamanic drumming, and probably many other things. And then we tap into the omniscience, all-knowing, our wisdom, our ability to solve problems. We tap into this either through a divination system, like a tarot deck, or some other kind of random chance indicator. Or if we can, we tap into it through very, very deep meditation, where we're able to really stay off all the content of our mind and stay attended to what's directly right in front of us, our presence. And so we are able to see our presence, our deepest, our higher self, our deepest center. So here we're able to actually see the image of God within us. At the first sphere, we're able to actually be the image of God within us. So this is our deepest center, our core. Here we're able to see it, and that confers wisdom upon us. Here we're able to actually be it, and that confers unity, because when we're actually at our deepest center, we recognize that it's a singularity, and it's the same for everybody. Everybody has the same center, so we're all unified. Okay, then the 0 above the tree is our mystery in life and our nothingness. The nothingness, there is no nothingness in the universe, but there is nothingness not in the universe. And so the zero is not in the universe, but it is part of the creator. And so there's a part of the creator that's not in the universe, and that is the zero. And so it is a mystery, and it's something that we only can be able to touch indirectly. Now, that is the beginner's version of the tree. In my teachings, we go and we cover the beginning, just like we just did. But then if we want to go into an intermediate level, we go a little bit deeper. And we, instead of breaking it down into just 12 different faculties of consciousness, we break it down to 144, or 12 by 12. So what we do is we take each sphere and put a whole tree on each sphere. So we divide each sphere into its 12 faculties. It's just taking it another level. You could go deeper, and then you could put another little tree on each one of those 144 and then break it down to 1,728. And then you could go another level. So basically, the tree of life can be infinitesimal. But for the purposes of just this intermediate version, we just want to go one level down. So we go to the 144 fractal faculties, or what I refer to as stages of life, spirituality, history, and consciousness. And I've compiled those 144 into a list, a guide that I would be happy to share with you. If you'd like to click the link in the description, I'll send that right out to you. And it'll help you as we go through these, because in the second part of the video, usually the last quarter or so, the last 10 minutes or so, 5 or 10 minutes, we go over one of those 144 fractal faculties in a little bit more detail. And so today we're looking at number 94 and the question, how does a universe of motion work with charges? So that's where we're at. Number 94 corresponds to the abyss. Now, so it's in the abyss, and it is occupying the second fractal of the abyss. While we were saying the abyss is about our psychic powers, it's also about our magnetic charges, our electromagnetism, but in particular the abyss itself. The fractals of the abyss are really more about electricity, but the abyss itself is about our magnetic characteristics that also corresponds to these omens and these being able to act upon the omens and the synchronicities. And then the second sphere is about omniscience or wisdom, and this is our ability to solve problems. So this is kind of related to solving problems related to magnetics, magnetic charges, and magnetic dynamics. Number 94 is called directions and dynamics. Stage number 94 is about how the magnetic and electric motions manifest in the physical. We cannot see fields, but we can see their effects on objects. Magnetic field lines run around the poles or run around the charges in circular patterns. Positive valence atoms tend to be paramagnetic, while negative valence atoms tend to be diamagnetic. The paramagnetic atoms also include ferromagnetic elements that occupy rows 3A and 4A on the periodic table, with a positive valence of 6 or more. There are 4 kinds of motion: translation, rotation, vibration, and rotational vibration in the universe of motion. A charge is a rotational vibration. Charges can be electrical or magnetic. Electric current is uncharged electricity and is a rotating unit of space. Voltage is the ratio between charged and uncharged electricity. Electricity is pressure-based, exactly like the plumbing in our homes. Electric current and voltage are used to do the orienting of atoms. And inductance and capacitance are measurable properties of this atomic orientation, kind of like a polarization of light. Dielectric lines extend from the point charge outward, radially, while magnetic lines run around the charges in circular patterns. Magnetic lines are circumferential. They run around the charges in asymmetrical figure eights. And put them all together, they create the shape of a torus. The ferromagnetic charge is like interfering when there is novelty, but not yet smoothing, action, but not yet reaction of the two-dimensional rotations. The two-dimensional rotations are uncharged magnetism, and they're universal in all atoms. It will exist, ferromagnetic charge will exist until there is smoothing and the atom becomes another atom. Iron is by far the strongest magnet from the first eligible position, meaning further valence serves to dilute the magnetism. Ferromagnetic charge has crossed into the time region unit of space, inside a unit of space. Space and time both have are quantized. They both have a smallest unit. And once you are inside of that one unit, then you move from a realm of time to a realm of space, or vice versa. This ferromagnetic charge affects only an appendage of the atom, the positive valence. External to the main body, the ferromagnetic charge is external to the main body, affecting only an appendage, like a foreign element. All charges are rotational vibrations. Electricity is 1D, one dimension. Magnetic is 2 dimensions. One of the rotational vibrations is in the dimension of the reference system, in the case of magnetism. One of the rotational vibrations is in the dimension of the reference system, and the other is in a perpendicular dimension. And electrically charged particles moving through through gravitational fields, but really electrically charged particles moving have magnetic properties. And so that's kind of the link between the electrical and the magnetic. Okay, now that is the number 94, stage number 94, directions and dynamics of electromagnetism. And I know that's pretty difficult and probably hard to understand. What I'm doing there is I'm taking the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson and the update of it by Bruce Perret, and incorporating it into electrical and magnetic phenomena that have to do with the abyss, which also has to do with omens and being able to act upon those omens, which is all part of magnetism. So hopefully I'll be able to kind of integrate more of the analogous omens and synchronicities within this concept of the magnetic and magnetic charges. But also, when we do finish talking about the tree of life, we will definitely be going into a long unit on the reciprocal system. And so hopefully, if you stick with me here on this channel, we'll be learning about this magnetism and electricity more directly in future videos. Okay, well, thank you for sticking around, and you can hit the like button. You can subscribe to the video or subscribe to the channel. You can share the video, and you can also donate directly to me through Cash App or Venmo, listed in the description. And for free, you can get a copy of the 144 Fractal Faculties, the guide that I have compiled. That is just something that you can use to cross-reference things and just to get the whole picture of it at once, because with these videos, I'm just giving you a sliver of it at a time. But if you have the whole guide, then you can at least get the whole big picture in one source, and then you can kind of cross-reference it as we go through the different fractal 144 fractals. Okay, well, have a beautiful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.